Well, I'm so thankful for Grant and Laura. That was a fun tour of their house. And, Grant is the longest serving staff member at our church by a long shot. He's been here way longer than I have. I think something like almost 10 years pretty soon. And, he has been so wonderful. He has shepherded this church from a blended worship service that involved like some contemporary music, but also like traditional hymns and organs and stuff. And every step of the way to where we're at now, Grant didn't know how to do it, figured it out because he's so smart and brilliant. And I'm just so thankful for him. Not only is he brilliant and a great worship director, but he's also a great friend. And he is a huge reason why our church is able to do what it does on the budget that we have, which is about half as much as most churches that have our size and influence. And I was in a meeting the other day with an executive pastor, just sharing with him like our numbers, where we're at. We're talking about COVID and plans for the future. And I just mentioned what our payroll was. And the guy about choked. He said, "That's it?" I was like, "Yeah, man. Our budget is half the size of most other churches, and it's because of God using Grant Allen and his incredible mind to make it all work." So we're thankful for him. But that also brings me to giving. I just want to say thank you so much, church. These last 2 weeks, we've actually met budget, which is so awesome, so amazing. We've been able to resource and partner with local ministries. We've continued to provide emergency assistance to families in this local community and organizations as well. And we're still seeing people far from God filled with life in Christ, which in this context is so amazing to me. This last Sunday, we were able to capture the information of 4 first-time families, so we know there were many more joining with us. And we also had 6 first-time givers. And I just want to say thank you to whoever you were. Thank you so much. That's crazy. That's awesome. God continues to amaze me, and I'm just so thankful. And our church is actually continuing to grow online. I kind of thought that by the time we had reached this stage, we would sort of start to tail off. But that's not what we're seeing at all. And I think it's because you guys are being faithful and coming, and also because you're being good about commenting and liking. That turns out to be a big deal for Facebook's algorithms, Instagram's algorithms and stuff. So thanks for doing that. YouTube's deals. If you like it, that's helpful. And then also sharing. Thank you for getting engaged and for serving and for caring and for praying and for giving. We're in the 3rd week of this series, How to Relationship While Social Distancing. And we talked in week 1 about having the tough conversations. Last week, we talked about finding fulfillment, not just being full, but finding fulfillment. And this week, I want to talk about developing rich, enduring, long-term relationships. And not just romantic relationships, but all kind of rich, enduring, long-term relationships. If that's something you want, even if you're not a Christian, you're going to want to listen up. This is actually, I think, it's a good message. I really like it. It's going to be helpful to you. But it's amazing to watch how relationships are changing in the world today. We have had a relational structure that involves 4 concentric circles that I'm about to explain to you that sort of existed for a long time, but recently it's been falling apart. But Jesus talks about this relational structure in the Bible. In 1 Corinthians 15:6, Paul says, "After that, he was seen by more than 500 of his followers at one time, most of whom are still alive." And what Paul's talking about here is the outermost circle of Jesus' relational structure. Almost all people for most of human history in civilized areas have had 300 to 500 acquaintances. That's about how many faces with names you can remember in your life. You have 300 acquaintances in your life. These are people you know from church, from work, from the community that you're involved in, right? Jesus' example goes on in Luke 10, verse 1. It says, "The Lord now chose 72 other disciples, and he sent them ahead in pairs to all the towns and places he planned to visit." And throughout the Bible, we see that Jesus generally associates with about 40 to 70 friends. Within that greater context of acquaintances, Jesus has 40 to 70 friends. These are people that you would invite to a wedding. These are people that you would call to help you with a barn. These are people that you would greet if you saw them at the grocery store and we weren't social distancing, you'd give them a hug, right? Those are the type of people that if you're moving, you would say goodbye to in your life. Then Luke 6:12, it mentions one day, soon afterward, Jesus went up to a mountain to pray. And he prayed to God all night. And at daybreak, he called together all of his disciples, right? That 40 to 70. And he chose 12 of them to be his apostles. So out of that 40 to 70 group, we typically have about 12 close friends. These are people that you might cry in front of. These are people you would share details that you're struggling with in your heart. These are people that you would get together regularly with, that you do life with. They're there at the holidays. And within that group, there's usually a group of 3 close friends. This is your spouse. This is a sibling or a parent that you're especially close to. These are the people you're closest to in life. Luke 9:28 says, about 8 days later, Jesus took his closest friends, his inner 3, Peter, John, and James, up on a mountain to pray. And as he was praying, the appearance of his face was transformed and his clothes became dazzling white. want you to notice right here, Jesus showed only his closest friend, Peter, James, and John, a part of himself that no one else saw. It was only his closest friends that actually saw what he really looked like. That's kind of remarkable. They are his best friends in life. These are people that are with you no matter what. No matter where you end up in life, these are people that are going with you on the journey. Even if you move, you keep up with them. You reunion with them. You travel across the country to see them. You keep your relationship with them. This is the structure of relationships that Jesus had. He had an inner group of his 3 friends. Then he had his 12 close friends, his 40 to 70 actual friends in life that, he would hang out with from time to time. And finally, his 300 to 500 acquaintances. But in the last 20 years, we have seen the structure of friendship in America really begin to change. I want to explain this to you, but I want to start with a story. I actually used to be a wilderness guide. I worked for a company called Expeditions Unlimited. And it was kind of fun. We would do whitewater rafting and backpacking and canoeing trips and climbing trips, rock climbing trips, right? And it was fun, but you would have to live in a tent for 100+ days a summer. And at first, the campfire and the tent life and the camping, it's kind of fun. But let me tell you, I did that for 2 summers. The last summer that I spent in a tent is the last time I've ever camped. It's been 15 years, and I haven't wanted to camp since then because I'm so sick of it. And the part that I hated the most was the different relationships that you would have every single week. It was kind of frustrating to me because people would come in and you get close to them and then they leave over and over and over again. Every new group just left me more and more jaded. And eventually my heart started getting a little bit rude. I wasn't as kind to the people as I was before because it's like, what's the point? What's the point of getting to know you? You're just going to move out. Like, why do I need to try and get to know you and whatever? And it was tough. And the reason was because we weren't made for temporary. And I know that moving around and seeing the country and touring the world, it sounds fun. We crave it. We yearn for the adventure. I used to yearn for the adventure, and it was fun for a bit. But humans were made to have a home, not just a tent. Now, let me get a little bit more granular on what it means to have a relational tent, okay? The outer 2 concentric circles that I talked about, your acquaintances and your 40 to 70 friends, these are what I like to call tent relationships. These are relationships you have because we're in proximity to each other, because we're around each other, because we live in the same place. We're around for a little bit. But, like when you're camping, you just leave and go home after a time. Like, that's these friends. If they left your life, it's like, it's not that big a deal. It's not permanent. Right? Then there are your longer lasting friends. These are the inner 2 circles. These are called house relationships. It's not just a tent. It's not temporary. You're building a home together. They're longer lasting. It's a house mentality. And they're kind of a big deal in determining life satisfaction. Your 12 close friends, your 3 closest friends, they are one of the biggest indicators of socioeconomic trajectory. So if you take the average income of your closest friends, that's going to be a really great predictor of where you're at. So if all your friends are richer than you, it's very likely that you'll have a higher income later in life. If all your friends are poorer than you, it's very likely that you will see your income level go down, right? Because your friends are a great predictor of your trajectory on several different levels. If all your friends are divorced, it's very likely that you will become so as well. Really, really interesting to look at. Now, here's the problem today. Since the invention of the smartphone, we have seen the near complete destruction of these 2 inner circles. In fact, these outer circles, tent relationships, have basically become all relationships. Relationships that should become house, permanent relationships like marriage, close friends, even family have turned into temporary mindset relationships. And the reason is the impact of social media on our lives. And let me explain. I follow this guy on YouTube. His name is Cletus McFarland. He runs a racing team, and it's kind of fun. He builds a bunch of race cars. I don't know him. I've never met him, but I feel really close to him. I watch him all the time. I watch his shows. I watch his struggles with all these drag cars. And, Cletus and I feel close to him because, I see him struggle with all this stuff. But here's the thing. Cletus wouldn't recognize me. He wouldn't come to my funeral. He wouldn't cry with me. He wouldn't wish me a happy birthday. We don't actually know each other. Our friendship is an illusion. Now, here's the problem. When things are great, I feel good. When my schedule is full and I have all these fake friendships with it, I feel like I'm in community with all these people, even though I'm not. It feels like it. Now, the problem comes when things get bad. Right? When we have the global economic shutdown because of COVID-19 and you're sitting home and things go bad, you realize, man, I have nowhere and no one to go to, right? That's an issue in life. The tent relationships have expanded dramatically in life, and it's left people feeling alone. For almost everybody under the age of 35 and many people who are older, we're beginning to realize, man, I don't have a lot of house relationships. I just have a lot of tent relationships. Now, this is a description of what tent relationships look like. Tent relationships are low commitment level. And this is why people in the modern era love them so much, because we're so rich and so successful, and even though things aren't going well right now, we have more options than any other generation preceding us. We can, once the social isolation is lifted, travel anywhere, go anywhere, pick any career at any time. Like, it's crazy. So committing to a relationship is hard. This is why tent relationships are growing. They're lots of fun. There's no future plans together. It's just we're having fun now. And here's the thing. When you go camping, if a storm comes, what happens? You pack your stuff up and you go home. We're not going to stay out here in a storm. We're just going home, right? In a tent relationship, if you get in a fight, if there's an awkward conversation, if something gets difficult, if there's a small incompatibility, we're out of here. We're just going to leave if bad weather comes. That's a tent relationship. And there's a lack of, I would say, commitment to capital development. So if you're in a campground, you're not going to build a patio. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to leave tomorrow. So why are we going to make a capital investment in this? In tent relationships, if there's an issue with somebody's character, you're not going to make an investment in developing your interaction together. You're just going to shrug your shoulders and deal with it, because who cares? We're going to be gone tomorrow. That's a tent relationship. A society that has a lot of tent relationships begins to develop a lot of problems because we never grow as people. Right? We're not investing in each other. We're not sharpening one another. We're not trying to grow one another. We're just having a good time, right? And if things get bad, we'll just leave, and I'll have another you in a minute. We begin to treat each other as disposable, right? You get in an argument with somebody, it's like, okay, I'm just going to delete you on Snapchat. Problem solved, right? I'm just going to break our streak, or maybe we won't interact for a couple months, and I'll reach out to you again, and we'll see how things look. But that's essentially how these relationships look, and it's frustrating because when the rubber meets the road, we don't have anyone who's there for us. Tent relationships are fun for a little while, but in the long run, they're deeply unfulfilling. This is something you need to realize. Some of you are 22 years old, 23 years old, and you're just beginning to realize this right now in your life. You got lots of parties, lots of fun. You've had a lot of good times, but you're so lonely. And it's because you're beginning to realize, man, I got a lot of tent relationships, but I have no home relationships. It's a tough place to be. Then there are house relationships, right? These inner two concentric circles. I think the best relationships, it feels like coming home. You know what I mean? The people you're closest with in life, you're with them, and it's like, that's where home is. Wherever they are, that's my home. Have you ever walked into a house that a couple has built together, like a finely crafted, amazing home? They put a ton of time into it, and you walk in, you're just like, wow, and it's beautiful, and it's homey, and it's just right, and it smells new, and it looks good. In my heart, a lot of times I get a little jealous. I walk into the house, I think, well, it must be nice. But here's the thing. You don't comprehend the years of blood, sweat, and tears that went into making that house look great. Right? And so it is with the best relationships. A lot of times people look at Chip and Joanna Gaines and they're like, oh, that couple just loves each other. And look how Chip dotes on Joanna. And oh, that's amazing. And listen, it looks great, but that's because they spent years crafting that relationship, investing in it, fighting for one another, not running away from one another, building each other up, right? In the same way that a house is finely built, relationships, the best of them are finely built. Listen, when you own a house, you don't tear it apart. You treat it really well. It's not like a campground where you go pee in the corner, right? In a house, you're going to take care of it because you live in it, because it's yours. There's ownership of it. House relationships should be more enduring. They're more kind and considerate. You think before you speak because you're in this together. It's an ownership mentality. And here's the deal. Here's a simple truth today. I think the greatest relational struggles today are because we bring a tent mindset into a house relationship. Tent relationships require less from us, but they give less to us. And this is such a big deal. So many people are like, well, tent relationships are just easier. It's easier not to get emotionally involved. It's easier. Listen, they're also giving less to you because you get what you give in relationships and in life. Tent relationships are less fulfilling. They're less helpful. They're less on every level. House relationships, oh man, they require much more work. A house requires much more work, but they give much more to us. They give us deep fulfillment. They give us life partners who are there when you need them. There's more on every level because you get what you give. And I think the core of what we're facing today, it's not just people bringing a tent mindset to relationships that should have a house mindset. It's people who have forgotten how to build a home-style relationship. I think many Americans grew up without ever seeing it modeled. Like, they don't have the skill. And it's why we're in this epidemic that we're in. We're in a marriage and friendship epidemic. We're seeing marriage rates in America fall, not just a divorce rate rise, but we're seeing marriage rates fall. People just aren't getting married. I read a horrible article in the Washington Post, which is not a great publication, but I read an article that talked about how marriage was a privilege of the rich. That's ridiculous. Rich is the result of marriage, right? You become rich because it's a great economic partnership. It works well together. But anyway, this article talked about, how marriage is in decline, and also friendship in America is in decline. This is crazy. 20 years ago, most people had 10 close friends. Today, 25% of men say they just have 0 close friends. Isn't that crazy? Most people in America today say they have fewer than 3 close friends in life. That's absolutely devastating. I mean, this is a staggering reduction. When you think about this 20-year reduction in friendship, it like should be wacky, inflatable, flailing arms, man. We have a problem with society. In the context that we're in right now, though, I think the problem is exacerbated. It's even worse because we're recognizing, man, we're isolated from all the tent relationships that we had, and now we're lonely, and we have no one. That's why I want to spend the last part of this talk giving you 2 tips, 2 basic steps to establishing a house relationship. I think it's going to be really helpful. I want you to listen up. The first one is really simple. You have to make a covenant commitment. A covenant is a really important relational commitment that most people don't understand. Okay? Most of us understand a contract relationship. Let me explain. A contract relationship is a give and take. A contract says, you do this, and I'll do that, right? You treat me well, and then I'll treat you well. It's a give, it's a take, that's a contract. We make an agreement. I pay you this money, you give me this service, right? That's a contract. A tent relationship is always a contract relationship. As long as we're having fun together, then we'll hang out together. But if we stop having fun, we're gone, right? A contract is a foundation to tent relationships. This is why they're so fragile. It's a give and take. A covenant says, I will do this regardless of how you treat me. A covenant is a give. It's not a give and take. It's just a give. I will be faithful to you regardless of whether or not you are faithful to me. If you're unfaithful to me, it's okay. This is how Jesus loves us, with a covenant love. It's a no matter what kind of love. When you have close friends, when you have house friends, when you have a real, true marriage, you take on a covenant mindset, a no matter what mindset. And this is what marriage is supposed to be. Think about our vows. For better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and health, till death do us part. That's a covenant mindset. That's a house mindset. We're in this. We've chosen this. But most people really don't understand that. When I do a marriage, the one thing that I ask people, I say, hey, look. I'll put the whole wedding together. I'll do like the service and I'll write it and stuff. But can you guys at least pick your vows and pick unconditional vows? Will you pick covenant vows? I hate the wedding vows that are like, I promise to make you smile every day and be your best friend. That's not covenant commitment. That says, I'll love you when times are good, right? True covenant love says, I will love you when you're faithful and when you're unfaithful. If we're rich or poor, if you're successful or unsuccessful, if you're a hard worker or lazy, I'm loving you no matter what. That's how God first loved us. Most people don't understand that. I heard one person tell me, well, marriage is a give and take. That's the key to a successful marriage. I laughed. I thought that's ridiculous. If marriage is a give and take, Kristen and I would have gotten divorced for sure on 2 separate occasions. Early in our marriage, Kristen was dealing with some mental health issues, and for a long time, our marriage was just a give. I gave and she took. She needed it. Thank God we didn't have a contract relationship. We'd have been done. Right? Recently, in the last couple of years, I've had my own mental health issues, and for us, it's kind of been a her giving to me, and for me, it's just a take. Thank God we didn't have a contract relationship. It's just a give for her. And thank God she loves me in good times and in bad. The best relationships, the ones that you respect the most, the ones that you admire, those couples that you see that are so strong and so enduring, it's because they have a covenant love. Covenant love is a decision. It's not a feeling. Covenant love, there's a moment where you sign on the dotted line and you say, this is what I'm choosing to give to you. It's a house closing moment where you say, I'm doing this for you. I want you to see Jesus choose covenant love for his disciples. One day, soon afterward, Jesus went up to a mountain to pray. And he prayed all night. At daybreak, he called together all of his disciples. And he chose 12 to be his apostles. Now listen. This is a decision. This is a moment. This is a relationship-defining talk. We used to call them DTR, defining the relationship, right? People don't do that anymore. I see couples like they're quote-unquote hanging out, but they don't know where they're at. They don't know if they're exclusive. Like nobody ever wants to talk about like defining the relationship. When I was young, we used to have this website called MySpace, and you could actually rank all of your friendships in order, like from best friends to not so best friends. And part of that is really cruel and vindictive, but part of that is like, at least we're talking about where we're at with each other. At least we're taking the time to define the relationship. I think so many people don't ever talk about like, hey, are we committed to one another? Not just romantically, but in a friendship. You got to make a covenant commitment. And I think there's lots of relationships that will sit around the campfire for years, right? Never developing anything deeper than that. They're one storm away from the friendship falling apart. I have some couple friends. They were friends for like 10 years. And literally on a camping trip, they got in this big fight and it was like, forget you. They're arguing back and forth. And then they just quit talking. And it's like, that is unbelievable that they threw away 10 years of relationship, but it was just 10 years around the campfire. 10 years without a commitment together, just 10 years, and as soon as the fun stopped, the relationship stopped. A lot of marriages are actually just tent relationships. They're not enduring. You're just one storm away from divorce. One fight, one addiction, one lost job, one catching her texting an ex, one catching him looking at porn away from divorce. It's not because people are bad. It's not because you're bad. It's because the mindset is wrong. You got to shift your mindset from a contract love to a covenant commitment. I think a lot of us need to shift our mindset from I will, if you will, contracts, into no matter what you do, I will always covenants. The second step to turning a relationship from a tent to a house is you got to make a plan, a blueprint or a plan. When you're building a house, I'm not saying you have to hire an architect and do AutoCAD and everything else, right? I mean, you at least have to talk about a plan. Like, what do we want to do? Like, what do we want this to look like when we're all done? It's a healthy discussion. You know, it would be crazy not to talk about it. You know what blows my mind is how many relationships don't have a plan of any kind other than being in love. What do you want to do 10 years from now? I want to be in love. That's a feeling. That's not a plan. Being in love is easy. I think all you need to fall in love with somebody is the pulse. You know, there's some really great research studies that have been done on two humans falling in love. There's a couple researchers in college who put together like 27 questions that you can ask each other that are progressively more and more intimate. And by the end of it, you fall in love. And like 80% of the couples that did this fell in love. There's no compatibility. They just asked these questions, talked with each other, and they fell in love. Falling in love is easy. Staying in love for the decades, for the duration, is a result of a well-executed, mutually desired plan rooted in a covenant commitment. Can you imagine the disaster that would come from like winging a house renovation with just no plan? Do you have a plan? No, I don't have a plan, right? Let's start demo on this wall here. Is it structural? I don't know. Let's just tear it out and see what happens. This is how a lot of people do their marriages, right? Oh, you know, do we need to hang out together? Who knows? Do we need boundaries for members of the opposite sex? Whatever, we'll just tear it down. All of a sudden the house falls down. It's like, how did this happen? I didn't see it coming. I can't believe it. I just cheated on him and I don't even know. And it's like, I do. You didn't have a plan. I think one of the real indicators of deeper relationships is taking the time to define where you're at and where you want to be. I have so many guy friends in my life that literally, you know, they've known each other since middle school and they have never made a plan. They've been sitting around the campfire forever. And this is so many guy relationships. The only things they talk about are fish, guns, and girls. We don't talk about dreams. We don't talk about desires. We don't talk about deep things. Just fish, guns, girls, boats, whatever. They say they're fine with this. I hear guys say they're fine with this all the time. The only reason they're fine with it is because of ignorance, right? I hear people all the time say, well, the mountains aren't that great. I never want to see the world. Have you ever seen the Rocky Mountains? Have you ever seen the Grand Canyon? Have you ever stood in the headwaters of the Nile? Have you looked at true geological beauty? No, you haven't. You say it doesn't matter. It's because you've never seen it. If you saw it, you'd be like, it's amazing. I see so many guys who are like, well, I don't need intimacy. I don't need to talk about emotions. It's because you haven't experienced it. You don't know what you're missing out on. It's amazing. Deep relationships have a level of fulfillment that I didn't even know was there until I found it. Just like ladies don't like camping as much as guys do on the same level, I think most women are less okay with living in the relational tent while men are okay with it. A home renovation or construction or decorating project, it's gonna go terrible without a plan. You need to make a plan. And I think a lot of relationships need to make a plan. You know, when you get married, you and your spouse, if you get married young, will probably ultimately be responsible for the potential average couple of about $15 million in income and accrued interest, right? Now, we blow it on all kinds of things. We never have that whole amount of money at one time. But what blows my mind is many couples never talk about how they want to allocate $15 million. Like, how much research would you put into making $1 million investment? A lot. Like, you'd read books. You'd talk about it. You'd think about it. But when it comes to the $15 million of your lifetime earnings with your spouse, we don't even talk about it. It's like, make a plan. I just want to challenge you today. I want to challenge all relationships to consider making a plan. Describe in detail where you want to be with a specific relationship in 10 years. Like, take the time to talk about it. Like, teenage girls, I want to challenge you to talk about the relationship you want with your mother in 10 years. I think so many teenage girls are like brats to their moms because they haven't actually made a plan. Like, if you made a plan, you'd realize, man, I would like my mother to take care of her grandchildren and give me a break once in a while, right? That would be awesome. But you're not treating her like that because you don't have a plan. Now, if you had a plan, if that was part of the plan, then you would change, right? And I think another thing, I think junior hires and senior hires in particular have a really tough time delineating between a tent relationship and a house relationship. A lot of times we conflate the two. You look at your friends and your acquaintances in school, and those are the ones you're like, we're gonna be friends forever, which is laughable because the moment you graduate, you'll like basically never see any of them again, right? But then the house relationships, the one that matter the most, your parents, your siblings, you know, your brothers and sisters, they're the people that will be with you for life. And you treat them like they're tents, right? And you gotta change if you actually take the time to think about it. How do you wanna feel about each other 20 years from now? Right? You look at your sister, you look at your brother, you say, man, how do you want to feel about them 20 years from now? How do you want to treat each other 20 years from now? And most importantly, what do you need to do to get to that place today? Like, those are important questions. That's making a plan. And my hope is today you'll actually start to discuss that. You'll start to think about it. You don't need to be a Christian to see the value in that. If you're married, or in another type of business partnership, because marriage is more than a business partnership, but at its core, it is also a business partnership. That's a big part of it. I would encourage you to talk about where you want to be financially, like regarding possessions in 10 years, in 50 years, in 100 years, right? We won't be here in 100 years, but our great-grandchildren will be, and what kind of legacy do we want to leave for them? So many people talk about what they can afford today. Can I make the payment? No, that's silly. That's a tent mentality. That's now, that's temporary, that's here. Talk about what you want to be able to afford 20 years from now together. Talk about how you want to be able to give and transform the next generation's outcomes 20 years from now. Talk about how you need to live to get there. Having a plan makes a relationship so much more captivating. I think there's a big difference between being adventurous and being irresponsible. I meet a lot of people who say, Pastor, I just want to be spontaneous with life. I don't want to have a plan. I want to be spontaneous. I just want to send it, right? And I heard one person say, I want to be spontaneous like Queen Elsa from Frozen 2. You know, she just went into the unknown. And I've been watching a lot of Frozen 2 on lockdown, okay? Big popular movie in our house. I get it. She went into the unknown. But you know what? She had a plan. She was like chasing down that voice that she heard. She specifically wanted to figure it out and unlock the mystery. She had a plan. She had a plot. And I think creating goals adds plot and adventure to our lives. Without that, we're just sort of wandering around. It would be a terrible movie if Queen Elsa was just making ice sculptures all day, which is what she was doing at the start, right? But eventually, she had a plan. I think having a plan helps you define the days, months, and years. If there is no goal other than simply being in love forever and enjoying each other always, it's going to get old. I meet so many couples, okay? Their kids move out. They've been married for 20 or 30 years. They come in my office, and they're like, we just fell out of love. How did it happen? We just fell out of love. Now we're going to get divorced because we just fell out of love. Well, no, you didn't fall out of love. You had no plan together. Of course, it was bound to happen because you've been camping for 30 years. And camping is fun for a couple years. Having fun, just hanging out is fun for a little while. But you know what? Eventually, it gets really, really old. And I think that's the fundamental issue with all these couples who say, well, I just fell out of love. You didn't fall out of love. You didn't have a plan. If you had a plan, life would be a lot better. So make a 1-year, a 10-year, a 20-year, a 50-year plan. Helps life get so much more exciting. Brings meaning and value to every relationship. Jesus did this with his disciples and all Christians. In Matthew 28:19, he said, therefore go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Listen, Jesus ascends into heaven. This is the last thing he ever says to his disciples. Yet they continue to have a rich relationship with each other and with Jesus. Why? Because he gave them a plan. And that's what a plan does. People all the time ask me, why does God need me to serve him? He doesn't need you to serve him. Service is the mechanism by which we are drawn to God in relationship. Do you have a plan for your closest relationships? If you cannot state the plan for your closest relationships in one life-giving sentence off the top of your head right now, I seriously question whether or not you have one. I want to challenge you to spend some time thinking like, what is the plan? What is the plan? People look at Kristen and I, and they say they want to be like us, right? I've had people say, I want a relationship. Your relationship goals. Listen, it's not because we're a good match. Kristen and I are actually very incompatible. We are a terrible match for each other. Like, in all honesty, she's an extremely considerate, kind, compassionate woman. I'm an extremely inconsiderate, bullish, bull in a china shop kind of person when it comes to emotions and hurting people and everything else. We don't get along. Like, naturally, we're very incompatible. But our great plan to serve Jesus and build his kingdom together, rooted in a covenant commitment, has made our relationship rich, robust, and enduring and meaningful. And I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, I just married the wrong person. You don't understand, I married the wrong person. Listen, that's a myth. I don't think people married the wrong person. I think they brought the wrong mentality into the relationship. I mean, if that's actually true, then Kristen and I, we married the wrong person. But you know what? No. We have a plan together. We have a covenant commitment rooted in a covenant purpose. And the greatest, deepest, richest bonds in a relationship are formed from mutual struggle. I just think that in your life, there's so much meaning, there's so much value, there's so much purpose that comes from a covenant commitment rooted in a covenant plan and purpose. I think so many relationships today are people just struggling and hurting. I think so many people, even outside of relationships, are struggling without a plan, which is not what God made us for. We were made to work for his glory. I want to challenge you today to think about what your plan is for your family. My last thought is really simple. Okay, this isn't really a point, it's just a closing thought. Our relationships, all of them, but especially those inner two circles, the house-type relationships, they're always a work in progress, right? You get to a campsite and you relax. You set up and you relax. You just have fun. When it comes to a house, I mean, it's never done. You're always maintaining. You're always working. You're always working on it. It's not like you can relax and say, oh, we just did it. There's always something to do. God saves us from sin because sin hurts relationships, right? That's why he calls sin, right? Sleeping with someone you're not married to, it hurts, their future spouse. It hurts your future marriage. Lying hurts relationships, right? And he values relationships. That's why he says don't sin. He says, serve him because we're drawn together in purpose. It's not because he needs us. It's because our God-given purpose is the mechanism through which we remain close to one another and close to God. In the most important relationships of your life, you will never arrive at a destination. But the call, the purpose, the destination is what will draw you together in love for one another and love for God. It's such a meaningful experience. For Kristen and I would say this is what has made our relationship enduring. It is God's purpose for our life. And listen, we have a great relationship. I love it. Our marriage is good. Our marriage is probably better than ever. But it hasn't been without its struggles. Kristen always says, John, without Jesus, I would have divorced you long ago. But because of Jesus, if you leave, I'm coming with you, right? And I say the same back to her. We love each other, and it's because of Jesus. We can't take credit for it. Like, we're both very, very flawed people. Even when Kristen and I are going to the lake, we talk about our purpose all the time. I work 6 days a week, work a lot of long hours, especially during this time. There have been some long hours. But even when we're going to the lake on our off day, we ask ourselves, what does God's purpose look like for us in this context? How are we building a home for Christ and a home for each other and a home for our kids during this time together? And we specifically just talk about it because we know that our day at the lake is going to be better with a purpose. It's going to be more meaningful because sitting around the campfire and eating s'mores, after a while, that just gets old. God calls us to more. And when all of a sudden there's a deeper meaning to that time together, man, it's so much better. It's so much richer. There's so much more commitment behind it. I just know that through this entire experience, through this COVID-19 epidemic and all that's going on, God is exposing some underlying hurt and pain relationally. A lot of us have been stripped of our schedules. We've been stripped of all the tent relationships we had in our life. And I think a lot of us are beginning to realize we don't have anything to come home to. I know some of you today, you are lonely. You are straight up lonely. You're at home, you're broken. You might have someone that you're married to, but you feel alone still. Listen, no matter how you feel, I want you to know it's not too late. It's not too late. The first, most important relational home that we have is our relationship with God. If you are at odds with and angry at most people in your life, if you feel alone, I think so often, not all the time, but so often, it is because we don't have a great relationship with God. I know some people are like, no, that's what I have. I have a relationship with God. I just don't get along with anyone else. No. Jesus tells us that we can't have a relationship with him unless we forgive and love others in our life. Intimacy with God, intimacy with people begins with a relationship with God. Intimacy with God comes from receiving his forgiveness and then passing it to everybody else in your life. So you being able to get along with, you being able to forgive and love others is evidence that God is living inside of you. I know that some of you are lonely and hurting today. I just want you to know God is calling you home. He came from heaven to earth so that you could know him. He died an innocent death to remove hurtful sin from our relationships. And he awaits you receiving that freedom by asking for it. I know some of you today, you're broken and you're lonely and you're hurting. I want you to know there's a God in heaven who loves you, who is there for you, who can fill you and fulfill you. And if you're ready to change some of your relationships, if you're ready to come home, I just want to challenge you to text I'm in to 474747. And Kristen, my wife, or Elise, our executive director, will give you a call this week. All the others of you, I want to challenge you to put into practice this message today. I know there are parts of it that may not have connected with you, but there's probably at least one part that you're like, okay, I get that. And what we've done is we put together something called the Dinner Time Devotional. And I'm told that this shape right here is like cool and graphic and whatever. That's what Zachary says. I have no idea what this is. It looks like a weird egg, and I'm not cool anymore. I get it. I'm 35 now. But these are devotionals that you can do at dinner time with your family. They're designed to enrich your relationship with Jesus and your family together, which is sort of what we're talking about. You can download it and print it off, linked below or above, depending on what platform you're watching from. And you can also stop by the church and pick up a copy. If you're picking up stuff for your kids or whatever, you can get it from us. We'll have some there for you. But a few quick questions within that dinner time devotional. Do you have house friends or tent relationships? What can you do to change that? I think that's a legit question to talk in your life. Am I putting people in the right categories? Am I treating my family like the house relationships they should be, right? And I think this should be especially convicting for some teenagers in the room today. We've been in this time, your friends who you thought were everything, they've been stripped away. And I just want to challenge you to maybe reboot your relationship with your siblings, with your parents today. Next question, do you bring a covenant mentality to the relationships that matter most? How do you do well at that, and how do you fail? And I just imagine maybe some husbands looking at their wives saying, you know what, I'm sorry for running away every time a storm comes. You see, I think the sign of a true house relationship, when a storm comes and you have a house, you run into the house, right? When you have a tent relationship and the storm comes, what do? You run away. And I just know that God made our marriages, our closest relationships to feel like home. And so instead of shutting down emotionally, instead of running away, I just want to challenge you to start saying, you know what? When we're fighting, that's when we run together. I think that's been maybe the biggest saving grace for mine and Kristen's marriage is the fact that when we fight, and we fight for our marriage. But when we fight, we run home. We run to each other, and we don't quit until we figured it out. Lastly, and this is a big one, I think this is going to be the biggest thing for the whole series, okay? This specific next question I'm going to reveal to you, I think is going to transform some lives. It's a big deal, but I want to challenge you to write a letter to yourself saying who you want to be in 1, 5, and even 50 years from now. And the last page of that dinner time devotional, we've got an opportunity for you to write a letter, and I challenge you to drop it off at the church, send it to the church with a self-addressed stamped envelope, and in 1 year, we'll send it to you. But here's the reason why I want to do this. Right now, we're in this lockdown, and our lives have pretty much, like a lot of our schedules have just been wiped away and cleaned. And I really want us to sit down and think, like, what are the things that I want to bring back? We're going to get back to a new normal, but we'll have some control over what that normal is going to look like. And when we all have a vaccine, whenever that comes, and when we're all good again, I want us to really sit down and think, man, do I just want to fill her back up again to the brim? Do I just want to bring everything that was there before back in again, or do I want to emerge from this better and stronger, more efficient, with a more focused life? I want you to spend some time writing about who you want to be, how you want to treat the most important relationships in your life. I want to challenge you to really write about, man, these are the things I don't want to bring back into the life we're walking into, and these are the things I really do want to bring into it. I think it'd be really meaningful. Even if you're not a Christian, I think it would be a meaningful experience, and I just want to challenge you to be a part of it. Parents in the room, I want to challenge you to lead your kids to be a part of this. Parents in the room, parents watching at home, right? But I want to challenge you to lead your kids, lead your families to be a part of this. I think it'll be a blessing to you. As we wrap up this series, I just want to pray for all of you. I'd ask you to have a prayer with me. Jesus, I just lift up our whole church watching from all of our respective locations. I ask that we could meet again quickly soon. I believe that's going to happen. God, I ask that you would bless the letter writing time. I ask that you would bless conversations. I ask that you bring healing to relationships. I ask that people who are lonely could be filled with life in you, Jesus. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Well, I'm excited about what's to come. Next weekend is Mother's Day. We've got a really cool experience for that. Right now, we're waiting and trying to figure out what that's going to look like. But I also wanted you to know that at 8:15 on Wednesday night, we're actually going to be having communion. If that's something that you and your family want to be a part of, we'd love for you to join us for that. I'm going to turn it over to the ladies in the lobby. Let's hands in and team it up on 3. Everybody hands in, team on 3. 1, 2, 3, team!